Robin, the season.
Yes, well, where do you want to start? If we start at the start, cold and dry, hot and dry, hot and wet, dry and dry and dry.
Yeah, so basically it's a very dry season.
Yes, and we're still irrigating now, so just got to be a bit careful watering at this time of the year though, because it can cool the soil temperature down, and you don't want the ground to be any more moist than it needs to be. If you get that rain that's going to come sooner or later, you want the ground to be able to absorb as much of it as you can, so it's a tricky time of the year to be playing around with irrigation.
And irrigation is not cheap.
No, well, it never is. There's always quite a significant cost to pumping, and when you get a season as long as we've had, you've got to be mindful of your water quota and that you're not exceeding that as well at the end of the day.
Looking back over the season, spuds.
Yeah, pretty much all the crops have done very well. Anything that hasn't done as well as I would like, it's directly attributed to not getting enough water on when it needed that water, and we've had that with our pumpkin crop. We got caught a bit short at a crucial time with other crops needing it more, and the yield's going to be down a bit because of that. I've got some maize yields that won't be quite as good as I'd like because they're at the bottom rung, so the high value crops come first.
Now, you're normally based around Southbridge, but now you've moved north as well.
Yes, well, as you know, we do a 52-week of the year broccoli supply, and we'd been doing that for a number of years out of Southbridge, but some of the winters were just getting a bit tricky. It wasn't as reliable as I would like, and at times the quality wasn't quite to the level I wanted it to be at, so we looked around for another block somewhere where the climate might be just a little bit more favourable in the winter, and hence we're on this block up here at Amberley. And whilst it's not a lot different to Southbridge, it's just enough of a difference that we can reliably get good quality broccoli right through the winter and into the spring, which is pretty important when you've got a customer that you're doing a supply for, such as foodstuffs.
It's quite a big patch.
Not as big as I'd like. It's about 60 hectares, so it doesn't take much to fill all that up. And we also do our first early season potatoes up here as well. We find we can get in a slightly earlier a window.
And that's because of the climate.
Just because of the climate. I think it's close to the sea, but so is Southbridge. It's slightly more elevated here because we're up on a terrace, but we've got the Waipara River running down through here behind us, and I think we just get a bit of wind that funnels through there, and that just makes enough of a difference.
Disease pressure, we haven't talked about that.
Pretty much you get a dry season, you don't get much disease. It keeps that at bay, but there's a bit of mildew creeping in at the moment into some of the broccoli down at Southbridge, so we're just monitoring that closely and deciding whether to do something about that or not. Usually it's not a problem and it goes away and the plant just carries on, but keeping an eye on that.
And of course supply means prices, so how's that been looking?
Well, so far on the potato front, I mean, our domestic market stuff is reasonably stable for the main part of it, and there's a part of that market that's quite influenced by the Fiji market, which is influenced probably more directly from the what's happening on the process side of things. And my understanding is that the potatoes are reasonably supplied for this season, yet the Fiji price is still firm. And what normally happens is when they start sourcing supply out of Canterbury, there's a one or two players that not too concerned about what price they get on behalf of their growers, and the price drops something terrible. But that hasn't happened just yet, but I'm nervously watching that because it has a big impact on the bottom line to a lot of growers' businesses. And last year was a classic example that there was no need for the price to drop to Fiji. We didn't, like last year the price was about $200 up on what it normally is for the whole season, and they didn't sell any more or less potatoes for the whole season, so there's no need for it. But like I say, it has a big impact on a lot of growers' bottom lines, so hopefully there's a bit of sense in the system and that'll maintain for this year, but we'll see. Broccoli prices have been reasonably steady. With it being dry, that can sometimes have an impact on the market, more driven from the North Island market though. If they get short supplies up there or oversupplies, that tends to have an effect on what's happening down here. So that's been reasonably steady. Just not sure where pumpkin pricing is going to be this year, but I don't see any good reason why it should be any different to last year. I don't think there'll be any oversupplies. It's like a lot of crops, you can't afford to be doing the old grow and hope thing. I think most people now are growing what they know their market is, and the only variance is whether they get a yield that's slightly up or down, which can be managed quite easily.
And red beet is becoming very fashionable.
Yeah, the beet's looking quite good this year. We had a bit of struggle early in the season because it being so dry and getting a good establishment. And but I'm pretty happy with how the crops are looking. The size profile's getting very close now to where I want it, so that timing's quite good. So yeah, quite excited about that. We've got a bit of new equipment that we'll be installing this week to assist with the harvesting and the washing and processing side of that. So it's quite exciting.
Yeah, I guess everything has to be very, very well presented these days.
Yes, it does. It all gets down to that consistency. You've got the product that goes on the shelf wants to be as consistent as you can, week in, week out, and you only get that through having, good production in the first place, and then good post-harvest facilities to be able to achieve those results.
Good people.
Good people is probably the most important of the lot, and you can't underestimate. You can have all the gear you like, but you need people that operate it, and that's very important.